My parents gave my twin brother $400,000 to start a new business, but they told me to figure it out on my own. What happened when he failed? They lost all that was sweet. Okay, guys, get ready for a crazy story. I'm still trying to figure out how everything worked out so well. Over the past 2 years, this has happened, and the ending is so good that I had to tell you all about it. This is going to be long, but trust me, every word is worth it for the ending. Background. I'm 29 years old and male. I have a twin brother named Blake who is also 29 years old and male. We were raised in Phoenix in a household that was what you'd call upper middle class. Dad started a plumbing supply business from scratch and has made it a success. Mom is a loan officer at a credit union. Not rich, but very comfy. A nice house in the suburbs, nice cars, family holidays, and all that. But this is where it gets fascinating. From the very beginning, Blake was the favorite child, and I was the last thing on their mind. I'm talking about a kind of favoritism. So clear that family friends used to comment on it. Blake was the smooth talker, the charmer, the one who could talk his way out of everything. I was the quiet one who actually got things done but never got credit for it. The favoritism was so evident that our extended relatives started making jokes about it at gatherings. Oh, there's Blake the Prince and Ryan the work Herbie, my uncle would add, thinking he was being humorous. My aunt would often ask about what Blake had done lately and barely notice me. My grandparents even got involved. Blake got savings bonds for his birthday, while I got useful gifts like work gloves or toolkits. So, 3 months ago, we all went to my folks' house for dinner on Sunday, as we do every week. Blake comes in with a big smile on his face, and his girlfriend Emma is so excited that she can hardly sit still. By the way, Emma is the definition of a gold digger. For 2 years, she has been trying to get Blake to think bigger and stop settling for being an employee. Blake jumps up as if he is about to make a big speech. I have big news for the family. I'm going to create my own business, and it's going to change the way people upgrade their homes. My dad gets excited right away since he thinks everything Blake does is fantastic. Son, tell us more. Blake starts this presentation with his game-changing business proposal. He wants to launch a company that renovates luxury homes and focuses on making high-end, eco-friendly improvements for rich clients. His pitch was that wealthy people desire eco-friendly renovations that cost a lot of money, but they don't know how to find good contractors who can manage high-end jobs. He had a complete speech ready on how he was going to change the way contracts work by finding market gaps and underserved demographics. The guy was using terms that he had clearly learnt from watching YouTube videos about starting a business. Emma was nodding along like if he were giving the Gettysburg Address. She even added helpful comments like, Blake has such vision, and this is exactly what the market needs. What really impressed me was how well prepared the whole thing was. Blake had obviously studied this pitch a lot, and Emma undoubtedly helped him figure out what to say. He had things to say about target markets, how much money he could make, and how much room there was for expansion. All of it was total nonsense. Yet the person who said it sounded like they knew what they were talking about. I'm sitting there thinking, this sounds like every other home improvement company, but with better advertising. But my folks are acting like Blake just invented electricity. This is amazing, Blake, my mom says. You're going to make people's homes better and benefit the planet. Then Blake lets the cat out of the bag. The best thing is that Mom and Dad have agreed to pay for the startup. They are putting $400,000 into Blake Home Innovations to get it off the ground. I almost choked on my dinner. $400,000 for a company idea that was just remodeling but cost a lot. My dad looks at me with a proud smile. We're putting money into Blake's future. Ryan, this is his chance to make something really great. Now, this is what really got me angry. I talked to them about beginning my own general contracting firm 18 months ago. I had spent months getting ready to write a detailed business plan. I had 3 big clients ready to sign contracts. I had looked into how much equipment and labor would cost. I had even gotten some rough figures from suppliers. What did my parents tell me? You've always been smart and able to take care of yourself, Ryan. You are smart enough to figure this out by yourself. You don't require as much help as Blake does. That word independent made it sound like I had a character fault because I could handle my own difficulties. The difference between my idea and Blake's. I wanted to build a real general contracting business that would focus on home upgrades for middle-class families and small business projects. I had actual customers, genuine contracts, and a plan that made sense for me to make money in 6 months. Blake had a fancy name and a vague plan to go after wealthy people. I was advised to work things out on my own, but Blake was getting $400,000. I need to give you the whole story so you can see how messed up this family dynamic is. This favoritism started when we were babies. First, Blake came out. 4 minutes later, I followed. Family legends say that Blake screamed and pleaded for attention while I stayed calm and stared around, absorbing everything in. My parents always said this was how we acted. And that looks like their style of parenting as well. Blake was the friendly child who made friends easily and liked sports when he was younger. I was more shy, liked to work with my hands, and gained useful skills from my grandfather, who was a carpenter. Guess which way our parents celebrated every single baseball game Blake played, even though he was only mediocre. My parents were there with coolers, foam fingers, and professional cameras, as if he were going to the big leagues. They missed the ceremony when I won first place at the regional woodworking contest in high school because Blake had a tournament that same weekend. The woodworking contest was a big deal. I had spent 6 months making a complicated oak bookcase with hand-cut dovetail joints and handmade brass fittings. The judges were really impressed. I won a trophy, a $500 scholarship, and my project was in the local newspaper. My parents said, "That's great, honey. Did Blake's team win their game?" At the same time, Blake's baseball accomplishments were regarded like national news. Hit a base in a game that didn't matter. Dad contacted his pals to show off. Made the varsity team as a sophomore because half of the seniors left school early. Mom made dinner for the whole family to celebrate. Blake wanted to take his girlfriend to prom in style, so his parents leased him a limousine and got him a nice suit. I had to save up from my part-time job to acquire tools so I could start doing small carpentry jobs to get money. Working for what you want builds character. The same thing happened in college. Blake had a hard time with his business studies. He had a GPA of about 2.5 and needed help all the time. Do you know who paid for that? My parents hired him a team of tutors for $40 an hour when he almost got tossed out of school for bad grades in his junior year. That semester alone, they spent more than $8,000. At the same time, I worked 25 hours a week at a construction supply store and kept a 3.6 GPA. They stated, "We expect nothing less from someone as capable as you," after I made the dean's list 3 semesters in a row. There was no supper to celebrate, no congratulatory phone calls, just expectations. Blake wanted to do an unpaid internship at a California startup the summer before his senior year because he thought it would look well on his CV. My parents probably spent $15,000 on his San Francisco condo for 3 months. Blake spent that summer sharing pictures of himself at hip restaurants on Instagram, but he didn't learn anything about running a business. That same summer, I worked full-time for a commercial contractor, where I learned a lot about managing projects, estimating costs, and dealing with clients. But my parents thought it was less valuable than Blake's pricey trip to California because I was making money instead of spending it. Blake worked at 4 different firms after college, but he was fired from all of them for not showing up or doing his job well. Every time he moved back home, my parents would help him emotionally and financially. He worked for a marketing agency, a corporate real estate company, and a high-end furniture store, where he got discovered sleeping in the break room because he wasn't good enough for the job. It was the worst to see Blake get more and more entitled with each bailout. Emma always reinforced this way of thinking by telling him he was too talented for regular work and was meant for greatness. They hardly even said anything when I graduated and obtained a job at a construction business making $45,000. I was getting to know the company by working with experienced contractors. But my parents were so interested in Blake's job that stable work seemed uninteresting and unimportant. In the meantime, I had been working in construction for 6 years, getting to know suppliers, subcontractors, and clients. I had worked with every part of the business. But none of that mattered because I was the one who didn't need help. I asked Blake if I could see his business plan the week after the big news. I'm just curious about this $400,000 notion that could change the world. He stated it was still being worked on. But the idea is quite strong. The first red flag. I asked for more information. What do you know about your target market? How many possible clients have you found in the Phoenix area? Blake had that perplexed look on his face that he always got when someone asked for details. There are a lot of rich folks here that desire great renovations. There are a lot of people that want to buy. That's not an appraisal of the market. That's merely saying things that are clear. I witnessed this calamity happen in slow motion over the course of a month. Blake didn't have a true business plan, a list of clients, partnerships with suppliers, knowledge of construction license rules, an insurance plan, or a realistic schedule for making money. I asked him simple questions that any real contractor should be able to answer. How long does it usually take you to finish a project? He had no idea. How do you figure out how much labor costs? He didn't have a plan. How much do you charge for materials? He had never thought about it. How do you deal with applications for permits? He didn't even know that most renovation work needed permits. The licensing problem was really silly. You need a contractor's license in Arizona for any job that costs more than $1,000. To get one, you have to pass tests on construction codes, safety rules, and how to run a business. Blake hadn't even thought about how to get a license. When I told him about this, he blew it off and said he'd figure it out later. He also said that licensing was probably simply a lot of red tape. It was even more worrying that he had no idea what insurance and liability were. There are a lot of hazards involved with construction work, thus any real contractor needs full liability insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and bonding. Blake didn't know these things existed, much less how much they cost or how to get them. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language when I told him that insurance alone would probably cost $15,000 to $20,000 a year for his type of business. He did have a logo that Emma made with an online tool and a 2-page business summary that looked like a school project. The logo was a simple house image with some green swooshy shapes that were meant to show that the company was environmentally friendly. The business summary was full of useless phrases like synergistic solutions and paradigm-shifting approaches, but it didn't give any real information about operations, pricing, or target markets. But my folks were already writing checks. At the next family supper, my dad said, "We've opened a business account for Blake. The initial $150,000 has already been put in the bank to begin things going." I was shocked. "Dad, have you ever seen real financial forecasts? Like real numbers that indicate how this company will create money?" My mom got in with Ryan. "Not everyone needs to think about everything as much as you do. You have to trust someone's business sense sometimes. You have an entrepreneurial mind, right?" At the same time, I was working extra hours and saving every penny to start my own business. I had saved $35,000, but I still needed $20,000 more to acquire equipment and pay for other costs. I could have started my contracting business and made money in only a few months. But I was doing it on my own, while Blake got everything handed to him. It became even crazier when Emma started posting on social media about how happy she was to be an entrepreneur's girlfriend and how she was going to shake up the home improvement business. She made an Instagram account to show off their business journey, with staged images of Blake pretending to look over designs at coffee shops. Emma's Instagram photos were so bad they made you want to cry. She'd post pictures of Blake sitting at Starbucks with his laptop open and write things like, "My CEO grinding away on revolutionary business strategies." The blueprints in these pictures were just printouts of generic house plans Blake had downloaded from free websites. She also started a business blog where she wrote weekly posts about the entrepreneur lifestyle and how to help your partner's business vision. Emma had never worked in business or construction before, yet she was acting like she was an expert. The most absurd thing was when Emma started selling business mentality coaching sessions on Instagram. She charged $150 for 1-hour phone calls in which she said she would help women unleash their partner's potential. People actually paid for this, which proved how excellent Emma was at selling fantasy. Blake, on the other hand, was loving all the attention and praise. He really thought that the buzz about Emma on social media was proof that his firm was doing well. He'd show our parents Emma's articles as proof that he was doing something important, and they'd agree with the professional marketing and brand building techniques. My parents believed it showed tremendous business sense and brand building, but it was hard to see. 4 months after the first investment, Blake's firm was already going wrong. But you wouldn't know it from hearing him talk at family dinners. How is getting new clients going? I'd ask because I already know the answer. Blake would answer with confidence, really well. We're in the last stages of talks with a few high-value candidates. This is totally false. I knew he hadn't gotten any clients since he had asked me to look at some project estimates he was making. The estimations were way off, either way too high or way too low, and proved that he didn't know how much it really costs to build things. Emma was telling Blake to spend more money on growing the firm and finding the right market. They spent $80,000 on things they didn't need, like a luxury office in a nice region, new cars with special wrapping, expensive marketing materials, and networking events that were really simply expensive dinners. My parents had no idea what was going on because Blake was telling them about promising meetings and possible partnerships. Blake would change the subject or Emma would say the information was private for business reasons whenever I asked them specific questions. At the same time, my own strategy was slowly but surely moving forward. I had finally saved enough money to buy a work vehicle and some basic tools. I worked on little tasks on the weekends and at night to grow my customer base and reputation. I had 3 clients ready to begin on big projects as soon as I could work full-time. But whenever I told my parents about how well I was doing, they would say things like, "That's nice, Ryan," and then ask Blake about his latest business news right after. The cognitive dissonance was out of this world. During Christmas dinner, things got out of hand. Blake and Emma came in wearing new, expensive clothes and chatting about how excited everything was and how they were ready to get some big contracts. Blake had on a fashionable sweater that cost $400 and new Italian leather shoes that cost $300. I knew the outfit Emma was wearing from a high-end store where nothing costs less than $200. Both of them had the newest iPhones and Apple Watches. Emma had a new designer handbag that I'd seen in a magazine for $800. Of course, we bought all of this with our parents' startup money. Dinner talk made me sick. Blake kept throwing hints about important meetings and great news without giving any specifics. Emma would add her thoughts on how proud she was of Blake's vision and leadership and how they were making something that would change everything. Who are these possible clients? I inquired. Blake looked scared again. We're working with a number of property developers. Which developers? I can't really say because of confidentiality agreements. This was clearly a lie. Blake didn't have any confidentiality agreements because he didn't have any real customers. He was talking about developers in a general way that sounded impressive, but he couldn't name any specific people because the meetings never happened. Emma jumped in. Why are you being so pessimistic, Ryan? Can't you just be happy for your brother's success? It was very glowing to hear Emma say the term success. She thought that spending other people's money on elegant offices and luxury clothes was a sign of success, not finishing projects or making money. In Emma's world, being successful and looking successful were the same thing. Blake was totally buying into this lie. Success? What kind of success? You spent $200,000 and haven't finished any of your projects. That's when my mom said something else that shocked me. In fact, Blake needs more money to fully grow the firm. We all decided to give another $200,000 to grow the business. It was clear that my parents were completely out of touch with reality when she said this in such a casual way, as if it were a tiny favor instead of a huge financial commitment. They were talking about $200,000 like it was lunch money, even though that was a lot of money for them and a big part of their retirement savings. I stopped eating. You're handing him an extra $200,000. My dad stated it was an investment in his future. Based on what proof? He's making something that might be worth millions. Has he shown you any finished work? Are there any happy customers? Is there any money coming in? No one is talking at the table. Have you seen proof that he used the first $200,000 for real business costs? More quiet. My dad's face was turning red. Ryan, Blake doesn't have to explain every business choice to you. We believe in what he sees. That's when I got angry. What is his vision? The man who has never finished anything in his life. The man who lost 4 jobs. The guy who wanted help with his fundamental business studies. That picture. Emma started to cry false tears and say that I was being mean and not helpful. Blake said that I was jealous and couldn't handle his success. I got up from the table. Do you want to know what's actually wrong with this? I came to you 18 months ago with a clear business plan, reasonable financial projections, real clients who were ready to sign contracts, and 6 years of experience in the field. You advised me to work it out on my own since I was strong. Now Blake comes with a gorgeous logo and some vague plans to go after rich people, and you're ready to give him $400,000. My mom said that every week. What makes it different? Blake needs more help and direction. No, Blake needs to be held responsible. But you've never asked him to do that. Now he thinks he can just go through life without worrying about the faults he makes. I put on my coat and went to the door. Don't contact me when this all falls apart. Because it will. After that Christmas dinner, I didn't talk to my family for 3 months. I didn't need to talk to them to know how Blake's business was doing. In March, my friend who works in commercial construction texted me. Hey, isn't your brother the one who wants to establish that expensive home improvement business? People say that he has spent a lot of money and hasn't accomplished a single project. At the same time, my own firm was doing well. I had officially opened Ryan's general contracting business and had a full schedule for the next 4 months. I was making $25,000 a month and it was going up all the time. I had moved into a lovely apartment and bought a work truck that I could count on with my own money. The nicest part was that I hadn't told my family about any of this. They thought I was still working for someone else and having a hard time getting my business off the ground. Finally, Blake called me in April. Hey, Ryan. Can we have a chat? His voice sounded like he had lost. What's going on? I know we haven't communicated since Christmas, but I need to tell you that Emma and I split up. Of course they did. I know that had nothing to do with the money running out. I'm sorry to hear that. I lied. And the work? We're reforming, though. Changing things around. In business terms, that means we messed up but don't want to say so. What happened? The market for high-end renovations is more convoluted than we first assumed. We didn't expect any problems with licensing, and the costs of starting up were more than we thought they would be. We spent $400,000 and never finished a single paying job. So, what are you going to do now? That's why I'm calling. I was hoping we could get together and speak. I have some thoughts regarding how we could work together on your building projects. I almost laughed. After 2 years of acting like my company concepts were a hobby, he finally wanted to work with me. I said, I'll think about it, and then I hung up. My dad called 2 weeks later. This was strange because my dad only called when someone was in the hospital or he needed something right away. What do we need to talk about? Ryan? It's about Blake and how much money we have. There it was. How are your finances, son? We made some big blunders. You and your mother. We gave Blake too much money too soon, and he wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. This was the closest thing to acknowledging he was wrong that I'd ever heard from my dad. How awful is it? Long stop. How awful is it? Ryan? Everything. We lost the whole $400,000, plus additional $75,000 we borrowed against the house when Blake stated he needed a little more to make things better. $475,000 is gone. No finished projects, no money, no assets to show for it, simply gone. We need your help, Ryan. And there it was. The real purpose for the call. What kind of help? We are in a lot of debt. Your mom's job doesn't pay enough for us to pay our mortgage. And I had to borrow money against my business's inventory to pay for Blake's startup. We could lose everything if we can't pay these bills. I thought about that. To pay for Blake's dream remodeling firm, my parents had to borrow money against their property and my dad's business, which was the source of their income. How much do you owe in total? About $350,000 in different loans and credit lines. We'll lose the house and I might have to sell the business if we can't get support. All of it. The home I grew up in. The business that Dad had worked on for 20 years. Their safety in retirement. They put all of it on Blake's stupid business plan. Ryan, I know we haven't always been fair to you. We know we favored Blake over you, and we should have helped your business when you asked. But you're our son, and we heard you're doing well now, and we really need help. How did he know I was doing well? I hadn't told them anything about how well I was doing. He went on to say, I've been asking people about your contracting business. People in the business claim you're making a lot of money, receiving wonderful reviews, and are booked solid for months. Now that Blake had failed horribly and I had succeeded, they were suddenly interested in what I was doing. Dad, can I ask you something? Would you still be asking me for aid if Blake's business had worked out and he was making a lot of money right now? Be quiet. Or would you be getting in touch with Blake? More quiet. Ryan, please. We're related. Family. When I was working extra hours to save money for my business, where was that familial loyalty? They gave Blake everything he wanted. I'll think about it, I said and hung up. But I had already made my decision. I didn't call them back for 3 weeks. During that time, my business hit a major milestone. I had signed contracts worth $200,000 over the next 6 months and hired 2 full-time employees. I was officially more successful than Blake had ever dreamed of being. I also did some research into their financial situation. Through some industry contacts and public records, I found out exactly how desperate things were. They had mortgaged their house to the maximum. Dad's business was leveraged to the breaking point, and they were about 2 months away from defaulting on multiple loans. Finally, I arranged to meet them at a restaurant to discuss their proposal. I chose an upscale place that I knew they couldn't really afford anymore, but would feel obligated to suggest splitting the bill. The restaurant was one of those trendy steakhouse appetizers start at $20 and entra are $40 to $50. I picked it deliberately because I wanted them to feel the financial pressure of their situation while we discussed their request for help. It was petty, but after years of being treated like the responsible one who didn't deserve support, I was ready to be a little petty. When they walked in, I could see the stress on their faces. Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past few months. His hair had more gray than I remembered, and he had that defeated posture that comes from carrying too much financial pressure. Mom was wearing an old dress I remembered from years ago instead of the designer clothes she usually preferred. The designer handbags and expensive jewelry she used to flaunt were nowhere to be seen. Blake wasn't even with them. Apparently, he was too embarrassed to face me. According to my parents, he was exploring other opportunities and didn't want to complicate the family discussion. Translation: he was hiding in their basement, probably playing video games and letting our parents clean up his mess while he avoided responsibility. Thanks for meeting with us, my mom said as they sat down. Of course, family is important, I responded, letting the word hang in the air. We ordered meals and talked for a few minutes before Dad finally got to the issue. I could tell he was uncomfortable asking his son for money. This was a man who had built a great business from nothing and had always been the one to make decisions and provide for our family. Now he was pleading for money from the kid he had always ignored and pushed away. Ryan, we know we messed up badly. We know we treated you unfairly for years. And we know we made terrible decisions with Blake's business. This was the first time I'd ever heard my father admit to making mistakes with Blake. For 29 years, every decision involving Blake had been justified as supporting his potential or investing in his future. Hearing Dad finally acknowledge that these decisions were actually mistakes was incredibly satisfying. Go on, we're desperate. If we can't get help in the next month, we'll lose the house. I'll have to sell the business for whatever I can get, which won't be much given the debt load. I nodded sympathetically. That sounds really stressful. We were hoping you might be able to help us financially. Even a loan would make a huge difference. There it was, the ask. How much were you thinking? My dad looked relieved that I was even considering it. If you could loan us $100,000, that would give us breathing room to restructure the other debts and save the house. $100,000. Less than a quarter of what they'd given Blake, but still a massive amount. That's a lot of money, I said. We know, but your business is doing so well now. And we'd pay you back with interest, of course. I took a bite of my steak and thought about it theatrically. You know, I've been thinking a lot about family dynamics lately, about how different children get treated differently based on their parents' perceptions. They looked confused by the direction of the conversation. For example, some kids are seen as naturally gifted and deserving of investment and support. Other kids are seen as self-sufficient and expected to figure things out on their own. Understanding started dawning on their faces. The thing is, when you treat kids differently like that, you teach them different lessons. The kid who gets everything handed to him learns that success should come easily and that other people will always bail him out. The kid who has to earn everything learns to be self-reliant and resourceful. Ryan, my mom started. Let me finish. So, here's the situation. You invested $475,000 in Blake's business based on nothing but his charm and Emma's encouragement. You never asked for a real business plan. You never required him to prove concept. And you never held him accountable for results. They were both staring at their plates now. Meanwhile, when I asked for $50,000 to start a legitimate business with real clients and realistic projections, you told me I was too independent and needed to figure it out myself. We made mistakes, my dad said quietly. Yes, you did. But here's the thing about mistakes. They have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are exactly what people need to learn from their poor choices. I signaled the waiter for the check. So, here's my answer to your request for help. No. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Ryan, please. You told me to figure it out myself when I needed help. So, now I'm telling you the same thing. Figure it out yourselves. But we're family, my dad said desperately. Family works both ways. You didn't treat me like family when I needed support. You treated me like the responsible one who didn't deserve help. I stood up from the table, but I'm not completely heartless. I'll make Blake an offer. He can come work for me doing basic labor. Starting pay is $18 an hour. He'll show up on time, follow instructions, and earn every dollar. If he proves he can handle that for 6 months, maybe we'll talk about more responsibility. My dad looked hopeful. That's very generous. Don't thank me yet. Blake will have to swallow his pride and work for his brother doing manual labor. Based on his track record, I doubt he'll last a week. I put money on the table to cover my meal. The job offer stands for 30 days. After that, you're on your own. As I walked away, I could hear my mom crying quietly at the table. 2 weeks later, Blake showed up at one of my job sites. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing old clothes, and clearly having lost weight. Pride broken. Ryan, I need that job. What job? The labor position you offered. I need the work. I looked at him for a long moment. Why should I hire you? You've never finished anything you started. Because I don't have any other choice. Emma's gone. I'm living in mom and dad's basement and I can't get hired anywhere else because word got around about the business failure. And you think you can handle taking orders from your twin brother? Blake's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'll do whatever you need. I handed him a hard hat and work gloves. You start at the bottom. You'll be carrying materials, cleaning up job sites, and doing whatever the crew chiefs tell you. No special treatment because you're my brother. For 3 days, Blake actually showed up on time and worked hard. I was starting to think maybe he'd finally learned something. Then on Thursday morning, he didn't show up. When I called him, he said he'd found something better and wouldn't be wasting his potential on manual labor anymore. The something better turned out to be a multi-level marketing scheme selling overpriced supplements. Emma had come back into his life and convinced him this was his real opportunity to build wealth. She'd apparently been researching passive income opportunities while they were apart and had decided that network marketing was the future. Blake's new venture was with some company called Elite Wellness Solutions that sold protein powders and supplements at ridiculous markup prices. The business model was typical MLM garbage. Recruit other people to sell products and focus more on building your downline than actually selling to consumers. Emma was all over social media again, posting about financial freedom and entrepreneurial mindset. She changed her Instagram bio to digital marketing entrepreneur and started hosting Facebook live sessions about breaking free from the 9 to 5 mindset. Blake spent $3,000 on an initial inventory package and another $2,000 on marketing materials. Within 3 months, he'd managed to recruit exactly 2 people into his downline, both college friends who bought starter packages out of pity. Blake's own sales totaled less than $500, mostly to family members who felt obligated to support him. 6 months later, that venture had also failed, and Blake was back to being unemployed and living with our parents. The supplement inventory was still sitting in their garage, slowly approaching expiration dates. Blake owed Elite Wellness Solutions money for additional products he'd ordered on credit, and Emma had once again disappeared from his life when the money ran out. Meanwhile, my business continued growing at a pace that surprised even me. I now have 8 employees, a workshop facility, and contracts booked out for the next year. I bought a house in a nice neighborhood and drive a truck that I own outright. My annual revenue hit $800,000 last year, and I'm on track for over $1.2 million this year. The success wasn't just financial. It was professional and personal satisfaction that I'd never experienced before. My clients respected my work. My employees looked up to me as a leader, and other contractors in the area knew me as someone who delivered quality projects on time and on budget. I was building something real and lasting, something that provided value to customers and created jobs for good people. My parents, they lost the house and had to move into a small rental apartment in a less desirable part of town. The house they'd lived in for 25 years, where Blake and I grew up, got foreclosed on after they defaulted on the mortgage payments. Dad's business got bought by a competitor for cents on the dollar after he defaulted on his loans. Mom's working extra hours at the credit union just to make ends meet, and she's talked about having to postpone retirement indefinitely. Blake is 30 years old and still living with them in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment, still looking for his big break. He sleeps on a pull-out couch in the living room because they can't afford a place with a 3rd bedroom. He's applied for dozens of jobs, but can't get hired anywhere because word has gotten around about his business failures and work history. The few interviews he's gotten have ended poorly because Blake still carries himself like someone who's too good for entry-level positions. The beautiful irony is that being treated as the independent one actually made me independent. While Blake learned to expect handouts and bailouts, I learned to rely on myself and build something real. Last month, Blake called me one more time asking for help. He'd heard I was doing well and wondered if I might consider investing in his latest business idea. I told him I was too busy with actual paying customers to discuss imaginary ventures.